us this Wednesday for our third TELSIG webinar. We're very happy to see all of you here, coming from all these different places, as you keep mentioning in the chat box. As Penny mentioned already, my name is Celia Antoniou. I'm a lecturer in English language and teacher, currently at UWS, but I also work as a dissertation supervisor in the Institute of Education in UCL. We thought that for today's webinar, it would be good to have a session where we discuss some practical and information for online teaching. This was an idea that came from discussions with colleagues, but also from online feedback on our social media and specific requests that people had. So this session is going to be research-based or a tutorial of how to use specific software or how Zoom works, for example. It will be recorded. It is recorded at the moment. It will be circulated online via mailing lists, websites. So I'm just repeating this information for those who have just joined us. It might help you make a decision in terms of whether you'd like to have your cameras on.
Wait, something is going on. Celia, you have been muted. Wait. I don't know how this happened. It's my mistake. Go on, please. I made a mistake. I muted you by mistake.
At which stage did you lose me? At which stage did you lose me, Penny?
When you were saying about that we are going to share all the videos online for your YouTube channel.
Yes, I was just explaining that if anyone doesn't feel comfortable with having their camera on, exactly because the webinar will be recorded and then, your window might be randomly showing, you might want to turn your camera off and just leave the audio on. And then, as I was saying, just feel free to use the chat box to post any comments there, ideas or questions. And then Penny, I'm sure she will try to follow up and we could answer some of them at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let me just share my screen so that we can start. So can we all see the slides all right? Yes? Good. So first of all, what are we going to do with this session? We will address some of the current issues in online teaching. We will reflect on current teaching experiences and offer some practical tips and suggestions, as I've said already. What are some of the challenges that we all face at the moment? First of all, I realize that some of you might be at different stages. So there are groups of professionals who at the moment might feel that they are already very familiar with existing applications, software, technology. It might be because you might have already been involved in offering distance learning programs, so you feel that this is not something new for you. Then we have colleagues who have some familiarity with applications, that have been using them occasionally. They were doing blended learning in their EAP classrooms, but then they were mostly relying on face-to-face communication. And then we also have a group of those colleagues who were mostly teaching face-to-face, and suddenly within a few weeks they have been asked to move online. What we all have in common is that we find ourselves in a situation where we have to design remote learning options for our students and revise existing resources and materials for online teaching. And all of this during a situation where we're trying to manage our emotions of anxiety, of shock, our own emotions and those of our students as well. So as we go through this process, I think that it's very important to just make sure that we don't lose our hope, first of all. So I'd like to start with an inspirational quote here from Albert Einstein. Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. So I'm going to try and see what it is that we know already from the traditional classes that we have been teaching, how we can adapt today to offer our classes, and what it is that we can hopefully achieve in the future. The important thing, as the quote says, is not to stop questioning, not to stop exploring what we do. So we need positivity and we need to be confident these days. So in terms of familiarizing with technology, I know that a lot of colleagues in EAP have been trying to experiment with different ways. I'm sure you have been bombarded with invitations to online courses and tutorials. So they're a great way to actually familiarize with a specific tool or application and see what its functions are, how they can be used. Just try to be selective in terms of where you would like to invest your time, always by keeping in mind your needs, the needs of the class, of the classes that you offer, of the courses that you're involved in, and those of your students. The second point is about gaining some hands-on experience. So once you decide which tool you'd like to use, and once you have attended a tutorial on using Zoom, for example, which you find really helpful, for example, then it is a time to download it and try to play with the application, with the software, and see what it offers. You can also get input from colleagues. It's really important at this time to keep in touch with people who are in the same situation as you. Try to share experiences, and you can write, for example, in the chat box as we go, some of the tools that you have found that work for you. You can organize team sessions with someone who teaches with you. We all know very well that sometimes modules are team taught. So a nice idea is to work with a colleague together and try to log in at the same time and explore the options available. We can, I think someone mentions that they cannot hear me. Can you all hear me? Is everything right? Yes. Is the sound okay? Let me just check the chat box. Yes, the sound is okay. Okay, that's great. Just wanted to check so you can see that these things happen as you go and you offer your sessions. It's important to keep in touch with what's happening. Then again, when you explore tools, you can also experiment and practice in different ways. So for instance, use the opportunities when you contact your loved ones, your families, your friends to do your regular catch-up online. Every time you can ask them to use a different web conferencing tool, for example. Of course, not to teach them, but just to try out the different options and play a little bit with this. So the tools and options are endless. There's so many. We can make a list that can go on and on and on, and everyone will have something different to offer. But I think that it is important to focus instead on how we choose the tools that we work with. And this is something that might have to do with lots of different reasons. First of all, with institutional expectations, requirements. In some cases, there is relative freedom in terms of what you would like to do. In other cases, due to licensing or other restrictions, you might have to follow specific platforms and go with what is on offer to you. Time restrictions are also important. It's a completely different situation when someone does not have enough time to experiment with tools. In that case, my suggestion would be to go with what we're already very familiar with. So if, for example, you have been using Moodle already, and you had created activities there, stick with this and then add the web conferencing tool that you might know the best. For example, Skype at first, just to see how you can communicate. And then as you go, you can start exploring. If, on the other hand, you're at the stage where you are planning your pre-sessionals at the moment, and there's still some time, you might have made some decisions already, then there is a time to experiment and see what platforms are available and seek feedback and suggestions in terms of what you could use. And of course, course and task requirements are another important factor when it comes to choosing a tool. You would choose different options. If you have, for example, a 5-week sessional or a 10-week sessional course, if the emphasis would be on communication, and then on the context of the students or the geographical area of the students. If your students are currently based in China, there are firewall restrictions, so you want to make sure that you use a tool that will enable you to communicate with them. Zoom is one, for example, but there have been people who've mentioned that Teams, Microsoft Teams as well, works in some cases. So it takes some time to see and take all these factors into consideration. Your comfort zone is also important in terms of how your teaching style, your preferences, how you're used to doing things. because different tools will allow for different functions, and also your students' preferences. So that is another aspect to take into consideration. And you can see that so far I have been talking about factors that can affect what you choose in order to teach. But then in some cases, the last point on this slide is the tool-driven choices. So in other words, we're actually making sure when we choose a tool, we are using it to its full potential in order to teach our learners. And how can we change our online teaching so that we can take advantage of that tool at the most? When we have Zoom, for example, or Microsoft Teams, we can create rooms online for the students, and we can group students there. Or in some cases, there's the option to use a whiteboard. Is this practical in your context and based on what you can do or not? Are you, aware of what you can do? So all of these things are aspects that can help you choose what you're going to use. And I can give you an example of an activity that normally takes place in sessional courses, mainly because that's coming up really, and I know that people are involved in this a lot. So one of the traditional exercises, if you want, or activities in the sessional classroom is to have a lecture, either in a lecture theatre, or invite the lecturer in the classroom to give a lecture to your sessional students, or have a recorded lecture in the normal traditional classroom. And now that you will be working with your students online, you will be using web conferencing. It is a very good opportunity to break down the task in different steps. So, for example, you could ask, first of all, the students to reflect on the topic of the lecture that they will be attending. They can design some questions that they could ask the lecturer in real time, and then they could invite the lecturer to come and attend the sessions. And they could attend, the students could attend the lecture in real time through Zoom, for example. They could take notes during the session. And then, of course, at the end of the lecture, you could ask them to watch the recording again at home if you have recorded the session, and ask them to focus on specific points, such as discipline-specific terminology, for instance, or on other language aspects, language use aspects. And an additional idea would be to ask then the students to divide them into groups, ask them to produce a group reflective report on a shared document online. This is an option that is given by Google Docs, for example, where the students can work together online and edit the document and reflect on what they have written together, and then upload it on the Drive or on Moodle. Or it really depends on which platform you've chosen to work with. So this is just an example of how, something that you would do in another way in the traditional classroom can take place online. There is, of course, the bonus of the recorded sessions and how these can be shared. Do think about recording the sessions that you offer on a daily basis if you're not doing it. It's really positive for the students because it allows them, first of all, to reflect on the teaching content of every single day. Therefore, you create for yourselves a record of classes, but it also gives them the chance then to reflect on the language that was used in, during that session, and also to pay attention to aspects that they might have overlooked, things that you might have stressed during the session that they wouldn't normally pay attention to. They can also reflect on their own participation. You offer sessions to students online and invite them to contribute. Then when they watch it again at home a second time, they can see the language they have used, they can see their level of participation, what they were saying. So it helps them. And then, of course, once you record the sessions, these can be followed up by a variety of tasks, and not only on online collaborative written reports, but also forum discussions. You can have a forum, for example, on Moodle or any other of the platforms where you provide specific instructions to the students and you post them clearly in terms of what you would like them to do, how you would like them to contribute to the discussion. You can give some guiding questions and you can start a discussion yourself. I know that a lot of you might, probably think that forum discussions might not be very successful, but in order for them to work well with the students, they require your participation and active monitoring as well. They can be time-consuming, but if you're able to follow what they say, reply to the students, give them directions, and keep the conversation going, then and you choose an interesting topic as well, then this is motivating for the students. You can also have group work in the breakout room. So all the recordings can be followed up. So when we teach online, and we're talking about all of these tools and opportunities, we have, for example, issues that refer to pedagogy, online pedagogy. So the first point to consider is how, first of all, interactions change. How, when you have, for example, the students in the classroom that talk to each other, how this changes online and how the teacher-student interaction changes. So these are issues that we need to keep in mind. It's not simply the revision of the materials that changes, it's also the delivery of the sessions, the order in which we offer the sessions, the order in which we do the specific tasks we used to do in the traditional classroom, how we monitor performance, how do we make sure, how we monitor attendance as well, because it might be that the student is facing problems logging in, for instance, but they can attend the chat, they can participate in the chat, they have audio and no visual aspect, they can hear the lecture. Does the the participation in the chat count as well? Or can we give them the chance to still keep attending the session? And also how we assess students and the learning that takes place online changes. Principles are different. So, for example, with speaking, if you were supposed to do a debate in the classroom or an online discussion, then this has to be organized online in a different way, in the breakout rooms with, different instructions, perhaps, about behavior, about collaboration, about turn taking, how this can be monitored. This is from the pedagogic perspective. So it's important always to reflect on our situation. What are the needs of your specific groups of students? So what is it that the specific group of students that you teach needs, not, in terms of their age or preferences, but also in terms of, the technical skills that they have, how comfortable they feel using specific tools, what their language level is, how this can be adjusted. I can see someone is saying, isn't it surely a matter of practice and using tools as much as you feel comfortable? Yes, of course. It can be kept simple. It can be kept simple, and this goes back to my previous point where I was saying that you should be actually working at first when you really start teaching online tools that you feel comfortable with, and that you know that your students are familiar already. Some students might not know, for example, Microsoft Teams yet, so you might have to give them the chance to explore it first, or to explore it yourself first before they start working with it. So I think it's important when you teach online, just kind of make a list of the types of activities that you think your learner should be able to perform, and then try to match these to tools that are available and how you can perhaps adjust or transfer some of these activities online. It can be done together with the learning technologists or an IT advisor that you might have in your departments. And in some cases, you might have to be a little bit more creative in terms of how you could assess, for example, someone's writing, and how you could ask them to produce something in a different way, in a different format, perhaps as a blog post, or as we said earlier, in a collaborative document where they work together and they write together on a specific topic. So think about alternative ways of exploring aspects. Now, the important aspect here is also to prepare the students, apart from preparing yourselves. Students need also to be ready to switch from face-to-face to online learning. And there are different ways to do this. First of all, it is our responsibility to try to stress the advantages, to explain the benefits to them, to perhaps explain what the new skills they will be able to gain when they start working online and collaborating online. train the students to, once you familiarize with a specific aspect of a tool, with the functions of the tool, then you can offer them orientation sessions, just to see how, for example, they can use the chatbots, how they can raise their hand to ask a question if this option is offered. Zoom offers this option for you. How they can do simple things that can help them feel comfortable when they use different platforms or tools. Give them also some time to practice and experiment. Give them like a small task that they can do when they join the session, and ask them just to write a few things in the chat box to see that they explore how they can use it, to see if everything is working for them, and always seek their feedback and suggestions. Our students have experience with they use the mobile phones, they're familiar with other applications, so they will be able to tell you what they think it works well for them as well. So, it's a negotiation process in order to be able to find what they like the most and what you like the most. Now, these are some of the common questions that teachers have when they, colleagues have when they teach online. What if the learners don't understand what I'm trying to teach them online, because you feel that the communication changes when you interact with them? Or how do I keep my nerves under control yet still come across as confident at the time when I'm not sure how Zoom works properly, or how I can create a team in Microsoft Teams? So how do we do that? I would say that the key here is to practice, to keep practicing, and of course, with every session that you keep offering, your confidence levels will increase as you go. What if the learner asks you a question that you can't answer? And that doesn't really refer to answering questions, content questions, but things such as, I'm not sure how my camera works. I'm not sure how to, address a technical issue. And you will have some of these problems when you teach. Or you might as well have someone who is logged out and they're not sure how they can log in again. So again, it's a matter of trying to understand what is happening, or giving them an alternative option to participate, or just reassuring them that the session is recorded, that even though something has happened, such as a technical issue, they will still be able to watch the recorded lesson. And then how do you know if what you find is suitable and interesting for your group of learners? Now, this refers to engaging the students online as you teach. So how do we do that? A lot of colleagues have been referring to this. I'm sure this seems familiar to you. Students tend to go very quiet when you teach online. I'm not sure if they're paying attention or what it is that they're paying attention. There is an awkward silence. So these are things that do happen, but there are lots of different reasons. It might be that it's just personal characteristics. A student that is normally shy, the traditional classroom can be shy online as well. Or it might be that they have become shy because they're not feeling, comfortable with a specific tool. It could be that there are other distractions, online distractions, that might have another window open while you're teaching, or they might have physical distractions as well. When students are at home, some of them might have families, they might have children. Think about the BBC dad who was trying to do an online interview, and then the children came running in. So you might have, noises, windows that are open at home. It might be, as we said, that they feel uncomfortable with a medium distraction. That that WebEx, for example, might not be the perfect tool for them, and they would prefer to have something else. They might be facing technical issues. Or, and the last point is very, very important, they might be unsure about their level or type of participation. So, for example, they might not know when they're supposed to contribute, which point exactly of the lesson they can contribute, how. Can they just speak freely whenever they feel like it, or do they have to raise a hand? Do they have to use a chat box first before they talk? So these are things that need to be explained. So in order for them to know how they can participate, we need to have some rules explain them. So some solutions to all of these have to do with creating an online classroom routine. So you could start a new lesson by sharing some information, by doing a little bit of what we call a small talk, exchanging a little bit of information about your day, do a little bit of warm-up and tech check, make sure that the microphones are working, connection is good, they can see you, they can see your materials. And then do make sure that you stress the guidelines, the participation guidelines, and that they are explained and understood by everyone. Is it going to be, for example, a video session? Do you expect everyone to have their cameras turned on, or is audio only acceptable for the purposes of your class? Would you like them to use the chat box? When and for which specific purpose? A little bit more on guidelines. A lot of colleagues are worried about screenshots, for example, during the lessons, or the students ask if they can share recorded sessions outside the online environment. I think that the screenshot issue is something that we see in traditional classrooms as well, don't we? When we present, for example, homework or activities, and then students use their mobile phones or tablets to take photo of something. But I think in the case of online teaching, if you explain that the lesson is recorded, and that they will be able to have access to it later on at a later stage, then there's not really a need to take a screenshot, is there? Then when it comes to sharing a recorded lesson with someone else, that might be something that you will have to explain to your students based on your institutional expectations, as there might be other restrictions that have, that exist and are in place. I can see a question which says, what if the recording of the lesson gets disrupted? This is something that has happened to me, unfortunately. It was actually a recording that I was doing on Skype of a group discussion, and it actually, we lost the recording. But what I did was that I had a backup. I had installed a software just to record the audio, and this is how I managed to save recording. So always have a second option available in place. The one that I had used was Audacity by Beta, just a software that you install on your computer to record the session. It's audio only, however, whereas what I was doing on Skype was video. So it is something that can happen. So that, it's just the unexpected things. Technology can go wrong sometimes. Other solutions. Try, as I said, to provide a rationale for your online classroom routine. In other words, try to explain why is it that the students need to do a specific task in a specific way. Give guidelines when you ask students to work in groups and you teach them in groups in terms of what you expect them to do. Explain how they will receive feedback exactly, and if there's going to be a Q&A session. You can use the chat boxes, especially when you work with students in groups, because you might have noticed that when you teach a group of students and you ask a question in an attempt to make it interactive, in the way that you would ask the question in a normal classroom, you might actually realize that everyone starts talking at the same time, and you don't actually hear what the students say. You can't actually hear the responses. So using the chat box to see what opinions they have and what they can contribute could actually help you with the overlap. And there's the other option as well, where the other issue as well, where a lot of the normal face-to-face communication and interaction is lost when the microphones are muted, for instance, just like now. In normal face-to-face presentations, you would be able to see facial expressions. You'll be able to see, the eyes that might be rolling if the students hear something that they don't understand. But of course, if they don't have their cameras on, and if you only see random photos of your students, then you're missing this element. And this is something that you need, and you can get it if you ask them to participate in alternative ways. You might as well realize that Yes, that's a suggestion. You can use the form on Moodle, exactly. That's my next point. You might realize that your students prefer to write instead of speaking during an online lesson. And why would they prefer, for example, to use the form on Moodle during the discussion? Because it gives them some time to reflect on their contribution, some time to think, some time to revise as well their answer. You can avoid communication overlap. And of course, if there are technical problems, as we said earlier, this is still a form of participation for some of your students. So one comment here says, all these texts too much out of digital classroom, valuable and more than usual limited time. So would you suggest that we share optional and guidelines before the class? Well, yes, exactly. And this goes back to having, a session, the orientation session that I was talking about earlier, just to prepare students for the real situation, because, we can all find ourselves guilty in some cases where we don't actually explain to students what we want them to do, and then we actually expect them to do it, or we expect that they know how certain things will work, while in fact they don't. And what's the other point? I imagine we need to do that during induction or at the initial stages of the course. Yes, definitely. But even if you have not done this already, even if you have, forgotten for some reason, there's still some time before you actually do, a specific task, just to, explain briefly in a few minutes what it is that the task is about and how you will assess it. And as you said, either before or after the class. Or the first online session, get them to test technology. Absolutely. I would use emoticons to show understanding. I'm just following on some of the comments in the chat box as well. Yes. But make sure that you use also formal language, because remember, your classes are recorded and they will stay there as a record of what you have been doing. So you want to make sure, you might want to reuse this in some form in the future. So it's good to make sure that you are happy with the outcome. Now, in terms of engaging them during the lesson, the online lesson, make sure that you give your students a voice. This can be done in lots of different ways. Apart from the chat boxes, you can also use functions, the specific tool that you have chosen to use. That is a poll. I know that Zoom offers this opportunity. You can have online quizzes. You can embed other applications such as Kahoot, for example, or you can even use the feedback forms, or for example, Google Docs to create quizzes, or Microsoft Forms to create quizzes. I'm not trying to promote any specific tools. I'm just, giving you ideas of how these can be incorporated into your classes. And remember that encouraging online interaction in any form is an essential element of communication and language learning. Because I brought it as well, a quote here from sociocultural theory. You need to remember that social relationships play a central role in organizing the way that your students think and use language. And this is still something that needs to be part of your online lesson when you try to help students develop their language skills. So how do we encourage online group work? I think a lot of colleagues were looking for suggestions for this. I think it's important just to explain, the basics around this. You need to stress the rationale, why you have decided to do a group activity, how exactly are you going to do this, and how does this fit in with the overall aims of the specific session you're offering. Explain the requirements, not just the task requirements, the instructions for the task, but also will this practically work in the environment that you've chosen to use online? Practically working groups, how are they going to communicate with someone when they only see a camera in front of them? So you tell them that they're going to be in specific groups, in teams, and they will be working there. They will have access to a file. They can find it underneath that specific session. They will be assigned in groups in a specific way. This is something, for example, that you can do with Zoom. So the allocation of students into groups is something that can be done automatically. What instructions you're going to give them. You can give them an example as well Will they have access to that example to download it from somewhere? Will you be sending it as an attachment? And then give them some group work guidelines too for online interaction, because when people collaborate online, there are some differences compared to doing group work in the classroom. So, for example, how exactly can they cooperate? And they, for example, text each other on their mobile phones while they do the exercise or not? What happens with turn taking if they're doing a speaking exercise in groups? How exactly do they take turns to ensure that everyone has, the same amount of participation? All of these things. And I think that when it comes to evaluating group work, in this slide here, you're going to see how, I just tried to use the BALEAP Can-Do framework for speaking in order to evaluate group work. This, of course, is for master's level, but, it has some useful suggestions. And, for example, that when we are trying to assess speaking in groups, we're trying to see, first of all, how much the students take part in group discussion, and whether they engage fully in discussion rather than providing superficial contributions, if they communicate and share their thoughts and feelings, and then if there's an opportunity, they engage in peer review. So these are all aspects that you can keep in mind and use when it comes to evaluating your students' group work. And of course, when you ask them to do this, apart from the fact that you create speaking opportunities, you're offering them the opportunity to practice with their partners in a controlled environment. I say controlled from the perspective that, you have decided which environment you would like to use. You have decided perhaps which people will be grouped with which people work together, which materials you're going to give them. You have given them instructions. Perhaps you're timing the interaction as well. This is something that Zoom allows you to do. So you can assign someone in a group for a specific period of time, and then everyone comes back together and they share their views. And this therefore leads to increased participation, collaborative learning, but you also offer them, higher levels of responsibility that builds their learner autonomy. Because you're no longer at the source of information, but they get together and they work together. So they're responsible for what they have to do online. They feel satisfied if they manage to achieve a task, if they manage to create, for example, a specific exercise. So yes, this part takes trust, of course. You can join the groups and from time to time, so you can switch between groups, for example, in Zoom, to see what your learners are doing while they work there. Of course, you cannot, be there all the time. But then at the end of the group, or they can actually get back together, they can report, they can nominate a person that reports on what they're doing. Or yes, you can monitor them. Again, it depends on the numbers of students that you have when you teach online. So it might be that in some cases you're creating 2 or 3 online groups, and of course it's not possible to monitor everyone. Sometimes use of L1 is necessary to check. Yes, definitely. And just when you evaluate, again, remember that you need to introduce evaluation and feedback options to the students, the grids, the forms that you're going to use. How exactly will they use them online? Where will they access them? And give them the chance to do online peer feedback, because this increases their participation and it gives more well-formed feedback responses as well. And you could also invite them to contribute their own evaluation criteria, like to co-create the forms that you use that they use in order to give feedback to each other's work. By taking into consideration perhaps some of the criteria that they offer. Now, when it comes to online lectures, online sessions, a lot of colleagues were worried about the etiquette, about how, address your students. So as we said, set the tone and the level of expectations. It's important if you offer reading to them, to try to break it down into smaller paragraphs, cover perhaps one key idea. So keeping things short and simple is important. Presenting information in parts instead of having really long PDF documents that you present. If it's about assignments, grading criteria, everything will have to, broken down so that they won't really have to look for it in different places. And this applies to any session lecture notes. Presented, in a concise way, if this is possible. Keep the content of your sessions organized. If the students don't have to search around a lot, then their frustration levels will stay low. If you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, there is a way in which you can create different sections there according to specific topics and then post relevant information or files there. Doesn't this impede the use of authentic materials such as reading papers? Not necessarily, because the content will still be available, but it's just a matter of exploring different ways of presenting it so that you actually adapt to the environment that you're currently using. So it could be that you just break a very long PDF file into 4 different sections, for example, where they can click continue, and it just doesn't look really like a massive piece of text, for instance. Can breakout rooms be used in Microsoft Teams? Yes, I think we did actually a webinar with Gareth weeks ago. He explained how these can be created there. So yes, that is an option. And finally, when you do your lectures, manage the discussion forums and chats, just like we're doing now. So keep an eye on what people are saying as you go, what your students are saying. If you're using forums, someone did mention forums earlier in the chat box. They're very helpful. Just make sure that you avoid too many threads, which can make learning really frustrated and messy. It can get messy sometimes. So organize it carefully in terms of topics that you want students to discuss, and try to have a balance between student-centered and instructor-centered activities as well, because that can actually variation. Now, there are some other practicalities when it comes to using formal or informal language. Now, my recommendation for this is, you don't really know how you will be using these recordings in the future, but if you're recording every single lesson, ideally, you would like to use formal language so that these materials can be used again. Introductions, of course, your students will know who you are. But then if you're using PowerPoint, you might want to keep your name on the slides with contact details. Then the PowerPoint versus press goes back to what someone else mentioned earlier about using the traditional materials. So it's a matter of whether you would like to transfer information that you already have on other documents onto PowerPoint in order to present it in a different way, or if you want to simply share a document you have in front of you and make it available to students as a file later on. So I would say that this is a personal decision depending on the needs of your class. The other question was about voiceover or video recording. I tend to think that when it comes to, I think my suggestion here would be to have video recordings where actually your students can see you and hear your voice, because that makes the learning process a little bit more personal and it feels a little bit more interactive. Whereas voiceovers is something that I would prefer when you're trying to explain, for example, how a tool works. You offer advice and instructions. Now the background, of course, make sure when you do online lectures that you choose, the background properly. Lots of video conferencing tools offer you templates that you can use. So suddenly, right behind you, you can be, you can be transferred to Hawaii, or you can have something funny. In terms of eye contact, that's something to keep in mind again when you talk to your students. Remember that you always have to look at the camera. So it takes some time to get used to it. And then, as we said, monitoring the chat books just to see if people mention any problems, if your students face any issues, if they've lost, for example, sound, and the only way of communicating with you is through the chat box. So that is something that can be challenging when you try to teach online, then it can actually help you as well. And now, as we're just drawing to an end, just during the lesson, I have a quote here that you need to remember. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity, but an optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. So as you face difficulties while you teach online, try to also look at them as opportunities for improvement and learning for you as well, for your personal, professional development. One other thing that could happen during the lesson is that you constantly have this feeling of being observed, especially when the lesson is recorded. You know that every single lesson is recorded. So body language is important. As we said, looking at the camera so that you will be able to use the materials in the future. The use of humor can be helpful, you know, in the times of online collaboration where things might not be working. But then again, be careful, be aware of the fact that if you cannot actually see people, if you cannot actually see them, then you know, you're missing out on a lot of other information, paralinguistic information. So your jokes might not actually work the way you planned them, or if you're typing a joke, again, what would the effect of this be? Time and timing, that goes back to a comment that someone made in the chat box. Try to, you know, things that you would normally do in the classroom and would take you, you know, less time, once you transfer them online, might actually take longer to organize. Or another example is that when you try to put, you know, your students into groups in the classroom, it takes a while. Online, if you have preplanned this, then it happens in, you know, very, very quickly in the platform. So then you're ready to move on to the next thing. So these are things that you need to, you know, you find out more about them as you go. But it's actually something to keep in mind when it comes to timing. And be prepared for the unexpected, as you said. Something might not be working. Have a backup option. For example, what would happen if I lose the recording? Do I have an alternative? Can they still access, for example, materials? If they cannot access Skype because sometimes for some reason Skype in some cases is, you know, overloaded. There are lots of people using it. Do I have an alternative? Can I ask them to move to a different tool? And just a summary of points. Try to, you know, be creative. Keep exploring available options. Consider your preferences and those of your students. Try to have clear guidelines, both in terms of what you are doing, but also in terms of what you're expecting from your students when they work with you online. Make the necessary revisions to materials, to lesson plans, to how you organize your courses in the platforms that you choose. Encourage and support interaction as much as possible. And the third point is very, very important. Remember to take breaks. I don't know if you find this, but from my personal experience these days, I tend to spend a lot of time in front, you know, of laptops, of computers, and you know, you just lose the balance there between work and doing something else. So just remember to take regular breaks. And I guess that's all from me. Shall we handle any questions? Penny, do we have any questions?
I think you have
not addressed already. I don't know.
I think you have answered the questions already. Dr. Carol McDermott from Glasgow, she had to go because she has another meeting, but
that's fine.
She wants me to inform you that there is an event, EAP in the North on IT, 1st of May. So you can attend online. Like something I would like to add for today's webinar is like sometimes we bombard our students with tech tools and then we forgot the theory behind it, the pedagogy behind it, how we should treat students and like try to see behind the tech tool. Because like we may be aware of 100 software, and when we go to the classroom, our students see nothing and they understand nothing. And I saw something, and I would like to comment about it. I saw a question, like a comment early in our session. Like sometimes we bombard our students, and that's bad.
Yes.
And then we are so, we get carried away with the technology, especially if we like it, and then we stick to that and we see nothing beyond that. So in my opinion, stick to 1 or 2 applications that you think are going to benefit your students. Show them those applications right from the first session and stick to that. There is no reason to bombard them.
But can I just add something to this? Even if you try something at first and you think that, it was a good idea initially, but it turns out that it's not anymore, don't be afraid, switch back to something else, as long as you find something that, you're comfortable with. Now, there was a question about GDPR, I think, earlier. So it was about, yes, is GDPR something that universities have to deal with before the course? Yes, and you can raise the point with them as well. But do keep in mind that when it comes to monitoring what happens, you also have to be clear with the students before the lesson in terms of what happens with screenshots. One reason screenshots might be a problem is because, as you might have realized, when students share their faces, you can see their faces, and you take the screenshot, then their face is on the screenshot. So, can we share this? Can we not? I wouldn't personally share this, and I would encourage students not to do that, mainly because, your sessions will be recorded. So students will still have access to the content of the lesson. They don't really need the screenshot. Then there was another point. We should always remember that the task is more important than the tool. Yes, absolutely. It's just a matter of trying to find the right tool in order to, offer the task, but also try to see how you could use the tool in order to perhaps give your students additional practice opportunities that you might have not thought that they were possible before. You mentioned an earlier webinar about Teams. Can I access this somewhere? Yes, this was Gareth's webinar, and I think we have it on the website, Penny.
Guys, after this session, we are going to have our own YouTube channel, and all the webinars are going to be uploaded in that YouTube channel. We're going to become YouTubers. So we have some feedback about WebEx. They said it's okay, but the sound quality is not great. So most probably we're going to go back to Zoom next week. They told me from my institution that finally they have an extra premium account for me. Okay, but I don't know, something is going on with Zoom these days. I don't see this notification, oh, you have 40 minutes. So I will see how it goes, but definitely next week we're going to have a different platform. This is also for you as well, to see which tech,
how the tools work,
work better for you.
Exactly.
If lectures...
Another question. What about aspects of language learning and acquisition? Any advice about appropriate tools? It depends really on what skills you would like to develop. If it's more interactive, you're thinking about writing. I know that Greg, for example, will be doing a session. Greg is the member of the committee. Will be doing a session about writing online. I believe the signal could be better if people muted their cameras. Okay, that's feedback for WebEx. If lectures are recorded and students have access to these, how are we protected in case the students inappropriately use these?
My experience from UCL about this, because once I had my lesson recorded, you give them a form and they fill in a form saying that they don't mind if their faces are shown during a recording. So most probably, I suppose that universities are going to cover themselves as well, and they're going to put students to fill in forms and sign up forms saying, I don't mind my face being recorded. So I don't think...
There was another Oh, sorry, Penny.
No,
Sorry
go
for
go on.
There was another comment from Jane. It says, a student of mine experienced online bullying, so behavior expectations are also important. And yes, I would definitely encourage you all to explain guidelines clearly before sessions, ensure that they're not being rude to each other when they work online, and you don't have inappropriate situations or language used. I don't think you would get that, but again, just setting expectations.
With bullying in general, I think you need to make yourselves available to the students. Like, make them realize that if something like that happens to them, you are going to be someone who's going to act on it. And especially if it happens online, they can have records of what happened exactly. It's not going to be my word against your word. So make sure this is something that you mention in the very first session.
Now, there was another question. It says, the question about the recording is about us, not the students. How are we protected? So I think you mean that once we record the lesson, how do we make sure that it's not commonly accessible? Again, it really depends on the platform that you're using. In some cases, videos once uploaded, they cannot be exported, and that's something that the institution can work with you in order to achieve it. But then in other cases, when you use web conferencing tools such as Skype, the video becomes available right after, and then I think people can download it and export it. I think it's the user only who can download and export it, but I'm not entirely sure about this. So again, that goes back to what we were saying. Once you create a lesson and you start recording it, ideally you would like it to have appropriate content, good language, because you never know where it's going to end up. You might want to reuse it again. Someone might share it. You want to make sure that what you're doing there is a good record of your work. That's great and really useful.
Too many questions. I know. But let's bring this to an end. Next week, we're going back to our own good practical webinars showing you software. It's going to be another hands-on practical workshop from Sofia Mavridou from ITEFL. I will send further info later this week, but it's going to be on Tuesday, 28th of April, 12 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. Chinese time. We're trying to get BALEAP to give us the right to give attendance, like certificates of attendance. So we are waiting to hear from them. Exciting things are coming. Microsoft applications the following week. Then we have coding for Moodle. Again, I'm really excited about that. I just confirmed it today. So make sure you stay on. Our YouTube channel is going to be sent to you through the BALEAP mailing list, and we're going to disseminate the link through our social media. Thanks everyone for coming. And we are here to support you always, even if you have some questions, even if you're going to start online and you're overwhelmed and they told you, oh, you're going to use that tool and you have no idea how this works, just send us an email. Drop us an email, drop us a message on our social media, and we're going to organize a webinar and we're going to help you, okay? It's a pleasure for me. I see people sending us emails, sending me messages about our hard work. We're going to keep going as long as you need us. Don't worry about it. And we have exciting things coming up.
And of course, send your suggestions for any other topics to Penny, to social media. We will feed them back, and we'll try to, accommodate everyone needs, what everyone needs really, just to offer additional sessions for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice week. Of course, we are on Twitter. We are everyone. I'm going to share our social media accounts again. And thank you very much.